The scripture reading is Leviticus 26, 3-6. If you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments and perform them, then I will give you rain in its season. The land shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall last till the time of vintage, and the vintage shall last till the time of sowing. You shall eat your bread to the full, and dwell in your land safely. I will give peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and none will make you afraid. I will rid the land of evil beasts, and the sword will not go through your land.
You can be seated. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. It is good to be here with you, and I have already been encouraged and just filled today with the things of God, and that is due in great part to being able to spend this time with you. And I hope the same has happened for you as well. I hope that as you were coming in this morning that you got a family report. That's our bulletin, and on the back page of that there's a place where you can take notes along with this morning's message. It'll coordinate to the screen. And so if you didn't get one of those and you want one, you can raise a hand, and Alex right there will hand some of those around. Hopefully that'll prove helpful for us. Alex, there's one a couple rows up from you there. I hope that those are helpful every single time, and they always are to me, to just kind of give a helpful arrangement of content to help us see the flow of thought through a particular passage of Scripture. And in particular, that's what we're going to be doing today. If you want to open your Bible to 2 Chronicles 14. 2 Chronicles 14 is where we're going to start today, and we'll stay there through most of the rest of this message. That is page 343 in the Pew Bibles, I believe. And so if that's helpful for you, we want you to have it open to that. I want to remind you of a couple of things. One of them is housekeeping, and then the other one is very personal to this church family. The housekeeping one is that, remember, we have our assembly this afternoon at 4:30. We're having our brother Jared Saltz coming down from Smoky Hill to do the second in a 5-part series on themes in Genesis that go all the way through to Jesus. Last Sunday was awesome, so much energy and so much just good teaching in all of that, and I hope that you'll make your plans to be here for tonight as well. Tonight we're going to talk about, from Genesis 3, about how Eve saw that the fruit was good and she took it, and all the implications of the connection between those two words of seeing and taking something. That goes all the way through the Bible. It's remarkable. So your eyes will be opened in a big way if you can make the time to be here with us for that as well. So that's the housekeeping thing. Wanted to remind you that's coming this afternoon. The other one is on page 2 of the family report, right in the middle of the page, there is a note there about the passing of Miss Sherry Kravig's nephew, who was like a son to her, and she had raised him, and there had just, I don't know how else to say this, but he passed away under extremely mysterious circumstances on Friday. Was 31 years old and passed away, and it's being investigated to find out exactly how that happened and what happened. But I want you to know about that because, as you can understand, Miss Sherry is completely devastated. And I want to encourage you to pray for her. I want to encourage you to do your best to comfort her, to be there for her. Miss Sherry is so quiet and so sweet-hearted that she would never make a show of herself. And so a lot of us don't realize she does an incredible amount of charitable work in this community and is just one of the most generous souls you could possibly imagine. And I have grown to appreciate her so much, and my heart breaks so much for her right now. And so she's not here this morning for understandable reasons, but I would like for you to pray for her through what she's going through right now, and just wanted to point that out and let that be known. Okay, I want to get into our message this morning, but I want to make sure that those kinds of things are important to us as a church family, and we pause and let those be important to us because this is our family, because of our faith, and so I want to make sure we think about them and about those things. Now, to get us to 2 Chronicles 14 for today, the first successful climb that we know of Mount Everest, was completed in 1953 in May of that year. 2 climbers, one of them Sir Edmund Hillary from New Zealand, and the other a man whose name I cannot pronounce, who was from that region of the Himalayas. He was one of the Sherpas, and he helped Sir Edmund Hillary put his feet on the summit of the world's tallest mountain above sea level at 29,029 feet. It absolutely boggles the mind to think of how tall that mountain is. And from that point, in the years that followed, several more successful ascents of the mountain have been made by tenacious individuals and tenacious groups from all over the world. But through all of those, through all the well-known names that have made it to the top and have etched their name in the illustrious list of the toughest people to face a mountain, the Sherpas have been by their side through so much of tackling that mountain. The local Himalayan mountaineers who served as guides up the dangerous glaciers and the wind-whipped narrow mountain passes, their skills are the stuff that legends are made out of. The Sherpa people are the ones that own the records for everything on Mount Everest. The man who has summited the most times in one lifetime, he is a Sherpa. I don't have his name, but he's made it up there 21 different times. 21 different times to the summit of Everest. The youngest man to ever summit the mountain was 16 years old. Again, a Sherpa. The fastest climb time ever to the summit from base camp, 8 hours. 8 hours. It takes that long to get up Pikes, and this thing is twice Pikes. It's unbelievable what these people are capable of. They are powerful climbers who know the mountains well, and their help to foreigners has been invaluable over all these years. Now here's where we're going with this. From them, we learned the lesson that it's all well and good to want to do something great, but it would be foolish to try that without the help of someone who can actually get you there. It's all well and good to want to tackle the world's highest and one of its most dangerous mountains, but it would be foolish to think you could do that without the help of somebody who can actually get you there. The Bible story that we're going to study today reminds us of that same lesson when it comes to our walk through this life, because it's all well and good to want to do something great in the kingdom of God. But it's foolish to think that I'm going to do something great without the help of the one being who can actually get me there. And that's the lesson that we're going to learn today from King Asa. Starting in 2 Chronicles 14, going through chapter 16, this is the lesson that we are going to learn. And so, we start off with this man being a wonderful example of somebody who finally does it right. King Asa builds his nation up by seeking God's honor. And you're going to see this, I'm going to do a lot of reading today. You're going to see this in a couple of different ways throughout 2 Chronicles 14 and 15. And I think it's worth pointing out that this is remarkable not only because it's great, but because of the time in which it happens. King Asa comes out of a culture that really is not doing well when it comes to faithfulness to God. There have been so many dramatic ups and downs through their lifespan as a nation, and now we finally get a king who will help us to see the right way to go. And so we started 2 Chronicles 14, starting in verse 1. Abijah slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Asa his son reigned in his place. In his days, the land had rest for 10 years. And Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He took away the foreign altars and the high places, and broke down the pillars, and cut down the Asherim, and commanded Judah to seek Yahweh, the God of their fathers, and to keep the law and the commandment. He also took out of all the cities of Judah the high places and the incense altars, and the kingdom had rest under him. He built fortified cities in Judah, for the land had rest. He had no war in those years, for the Lord gave him peace. And he said to Judah, let us build these cities and surround them with walls and towers, gates and bars. The land is still ours, because we have sought Yahweh our God. We have sought him, and he has given us peace on every side. And so they built and prospered. Flip over to chapter 15 and start there with me in verse 1. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Azariah, the son of Obed, and he went out to meet Asa and said to him, hear me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time, Israel was without the true God, and without a teaching priest, and without law. But when in their distress they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, he was found by them. In those times there was no peace to him who went out or to him who came in, for great disturbances afflicted all the inhabitants of the lands. They were broken in pieces. Nation was crushed by nation, and city by city, for God troubled them with every sort of distress. But you, take courage. Do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. I just wanted to read that so that you can hear the actual way that it's being described as Asa builds his nation by seeking to honor God. He is taking away the idols from the land. He's building up their national defenses. This is a man who is giving strength to his country in just about every way, even if it comes at great cost to him personally to do that. Part of this text somewhere in here, it says that at one point he had to depose his own mother from her throne because she was worshiping idols. How well do you think that went at family dinners? To take away the throne from his own mother because she was worshiping idols. But it says something intense about the man's commitment to his God. And it's a really wonderful step to see God's people taking at this point. It's a wonderful thing to be reminded that if we put God first, he will keep his promises to bless us. That's what he was saying through that prophet there in chapter 15. All these different descriptions of the fact that if you truly seek God, if you do keep him first, not that you keep him as a means to an end, but you keep him first in your life, you will receive all these blessings. And they did receive them. They continue to receive them through so much of Asa's lifetime. Now, we're going to leave that there for just a few minutes. We'll come back to talk about those blessings a little bit further down. But let's just appreciate that the nation is improving. Things are going well because of Asa's commitment to his God. And add to that, part of his nation building is the military power that is being increased among the people of God during this time. Go back to chapter 14 with me. Let's take a look starting now in verse 8. Starting now in verse 8, Asa had an army of 300,000 from Judah, armed with large shields and spears, and 280,000 men from Benjamin that carried shields and drew bows. All of these were mighty men of valor. But Zerah the Ethiopian came out against them with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots, and came as far as Mareshah. And Asa went out to meet him, and they drew up the lines of their battle in the valley of Zephathah as far as Mareshah. I don't know how to pronounce any of these names. I'm doing the best I can. Anyway, and Asa cried to the Lord his God. This is what's important here. O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come out against this multitude. O Lord, you are our God. Let not man prevail against you. And so the Lord defeated the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. You know what I think is really fascinating about this prayer? Who does Asa really want to win this day? Himself? Does he want to walk away from the battle as a famous general? Does he want his people to walk away with the spoils of the enemy as rich people? Does he want to instill fear in the hearts of the people around him when they think about Israel's great military prowess? No. He wants God to win this day for his own sake. That fits really well with the humility that we've been talking about in the recent series of lessons. Because this is what it's about. Yes, Asa is at the top of the food chain. Yes, there is nobody that outranks him among the Israelites. And yet, Asa knows there is one being among them who outranks him, and that is God. And he would prefer it that way. He doesn't want to make himself great. What he cares about most is God's name and God's power. And so, against all the odds, Asa calls on the God for whom all things are possible, and God answers him. And this is the reminder for us in that. The reminder for us is the thing that we started with, that yes, it's all well and good to want to do something great in God's kingdom, but it's foolish to try to do that without the power of the person who can actually get you there. When we want to do something great for the sake of God, or sometimes we want to do it in order to make a great name for ourselves, we want to make a brand of some sort, we want people to look up to us, we want to step into some leadership kind of role. Honestly, none of that is what this is about, brothers and sisters. Because what it's about is the glory of God. And so we dare not just tap into our own skill set and think, I will do all of these great things for my glory and by my own power. No, the prayer is, God, you work through me. You do more than we can ask or even imagine through us. And do it for your own glory, not for ours. Prayer seeks God's power to conquer things that are otherwise impossible for us. Now, thankfully, our struggles are not nearly like Asa standing with 500,000 troops up against an army of 1 million troops, at least not living here in this time and place. Thankfully, that is not our struggle. And yet, with the much smaller struggles that we have, with the much more menial struggles that we have from time to time, we have the same power available to us that Asa had. And so when you find yourself worried about the bills getting paid, pray about that. When you find yourself worried about recovering from a failure at work, pray about that. When you find yourself worried that the church might be in trouble because the way the culture is going, I'm not sure if this is going to stick around, I'm not sure if we're going to survive, pray about that. When you find yourself wondering if your marriage and your family will turn out like they should, pray about that. When you find yourself struggling against temptations that only seem to get stronger, and eventually you're worried, I feel like I'm on a path toward failure. There's no way this can go well. Well, there is a promise about that in 1 Corinthians, and you should pray for God to fulfill that promise in your life. And when you find yourself worried because you're just not sure that you'll ever know what your purpose really is in life, pray about that. And remember what our goal is in living this life. It's the same as Asa's prayer in chapter 14, verse 11. Lord, let us live and glorify you. That's the reason we're here. That is our goal. It is to give him glory, that he may be highly exalted, not us. And Asa does that through winning battles, but he does it through more than winning battles. He does it through the most glory-targeted, God-focused act that's described in his life. Asa guides his people by worshiping God alone. Asa's devotion to God distinguishes him from many of the other kings around his time, even from his own father, from Abijah that we read about in the opening verse there of chapter 14 that just passed away. Most of these other kings, so many of these other kings were no count spiritually. But Asa steps into the scene as somebody that wants to be fully, completely, sincerely devoted to God. And so, let's start reading again in chapter 15, and let's start reading in verse 8 this time. As soon as Asa heard these words that the prophet had spoken, the prophecy of Azariah the son of Obed, he took courage, and he put away the detestable idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the cities that he had taken in the hill country of Ephraim. And he repaired the altar of Yahweh that was in front of the vestibule of the house of Yahweh. And he gathered all Judah and Benjamin, and those from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon who were residing with them, parentheses here, for great numbers had deserted to him from Israel when they saw that Yahweh, his God, was with him. They were gathered at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of the reign of Asa, and they sacrificed to the Lord on that day the spoil that they had brought, and all the numbers are given. Now, there's lots to love about this reading. Okay, there's lots to love about what Asa does. Number one, his thoroughness. Number two, his passion. That this man truly wants to serve God, and he will make it a national policy that God's people return to his service. I love all of that. I love seeing the way that this is going. The fact that people get behind his efforts tells you a lot about the passion and the sincerity with which the king approaches this. Now, I said the parentheses thing there in verse 9, and that might actually be my favorite detail of this, because in verse 9 we're told that people from the northern kingdom of the Israelites, remember how they had split by this point in their history, and so you have the two kingdoms, and they've had civil wars and all sorts of tension between them. But now there are people from the northern kingdom that their people don't really serve God well, But they see how well things are going when Asa's people do serve God, and they defect to go join him. So now instead of the 2 tribes that are part of that kingdom, we're told about 3 that are worshiping God: Judah, Benjamin, and Simeon. And it's remarkable. It's really wonderful to see somebody finally taking these kinds of steps. And why does it work? It works because of the statement from verse 17, that the heart of Asa was wholly true all his days. Couple that with what it says in verse 15, that all Judah rejoiced over the oath, for they had sworn with all their heart and sought God with their whole desire. And he was found by them, and the Lord gave them rest all around. Beautiful. It's just beautiful and so refreshing to read in the middle of this great period of spiritual unpredictability in Israel. And so the lesson for us is that God must always be our top priority. You remember from Jesus being tempted when the devil said, if you'll bow down and worship me, everything in the entire space and time will be yours. All the kingdoms of earth could belong to you, Jesus. And Jesus said, no, there's a passage in the Old Testament that says, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. And I will not break that commandment. That's what the kind of idea that we're talking about here, that God must be top priority for his people. If you love God with all of your heart and soul and mind and strength, there is no room left to love something that is contrary to God. Now, you can love other people and other things that are in alignment with loving God with your whole heart and soul and mind and strength. But there won't be room for loving anything else that would draw us away from him. It just doesn't work like that. And that's the idea that we're being told about through these sentences about Asa himself and about the people. That his whole heart was completely given to God. And the people that followed him made an oath from the bottom of their hearts that they too would be faithful to God. And so that's what we want to have as well. We want to have an oath that truly says to God, I will love you with all of my heart and soul and mind and strength. And again, when we do that, our love for other people will be the result of the fact that we love God first. Our love for him is priority number 1, and that makes our personal morality, our words and our thoughts and our actions, all of that comes into line with learning to love him first. Nothing is more important than that, and no priority can be higher than him. And when we figure that out, things will go well for us, just like they did for Asa. Because Asa, number 4 for this morning, is able to find peace by giving God glory. I hope that you were catching it as we were reading through those first handful of verses of chapter 14. It's almost like the writer, like his pen got stuck, like a record needle bouncing for a second, as he talks about the peacefulness of Israel. You know, it just keeps bringing up this word. They had peace all around. There was rest from their enemies. Things went well during Asa's time, and there was no war. There was just peace during his time. Why is that emphasized so dramatically in this passage? Well, number 1, because it's unique during this period of history. And number 2, because I think it's meant to remind us of the truth from the passage that Landon read before I jumped up here. That passage talks about the fact that if you serve God, where God tells his people, if you serve me, and your heart is completely devoted to me, and you don't bow down to any other idols, at all, then you shall chase your enemies, and they shall fall before you by the sword, and I will be among you, and everybody around you will either flee from you or leave you in peace. And the point is that God grants peace to those who seek him sincerely. This is going to be true for us, brothers and sisters, that when we seek him sincerely, we will find peace. Interestingly, the word for sincerity in the both Testaments carries the idea of simplicity, of singularity. Okay, so the idea is that if you serve God only, nothing else can come into your life to disrupt the singularity and the simplicity of serving him. And just by doing a little bit of math, you kind of figure out if you take away everything but one, math gets really simple, right? You take away everything but the number one, and math gets really easy. There's nothing to add or nothing to take away because the one is perfect just by itself. If that one is God, then we can find the peace that we want to have. Now, it would be really great if the story ended right there, but you know how these things go. Those of you that have been around Old Testament stories very much, you know how these things can go sometimes. And so we have to end where the story ends, which is in chapter 16, where Asa ruins everything by rejecting God's help. Now, I admit that ruining everything may be a bit of an overstatement right there, but it fit the template for the other points, and it does go really wrong at this point. Okay, so can we start reading in chapter 16, verse 1? In the 36th year of the reign of Asa, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, and that he might permit no one to go out or to come in to Asa, king of Judah. Then Asa took silver and gold from the treasures of the house of Yahweh and from the king's house, and he sent them to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying, "There is a covenant between me and you, as there was between my father and your father. Behold, I am sending to you silver and gold. Go break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me." So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa, sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, and they conquered Ijon Dan, Abel-Maim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. And when Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah. He let his work cease, and the King Asa took all Judah, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber, which Baasha had been building, and with them he built Geba and Mizpah. Now, pause right there. It doesn't sound like anything went terribly wrong, does it? Like it all kind of worked out. They were being attacked. Asa made this plan, and it all worked out, and everything went well. Here's the problem. At that time, verse 7, Hanani the seer came to see King Asa and said to him, "Because you relied on the king of Syria and did not rely on Yahweh your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you. Were not the Ethiopians and the Libyans a huge army with very many chariots and horsemen, and yet, because you relied on the Lord, he gave them into your hand." And he goes on to talk about how all of this, by turning away from God, is going to lead to the downfall and the end of peacetime for King Asa. Now, all of that to point out for us that we need to be careful, brothers and sisters, that when we turn away from God and depend on our strength, things go horribly wrong. We talked about this in the teenager class this morning, read from a similar passage to Proverbs 16, where it talks about the fact that those who depend on their own way will end up following the way of death. And so the warning is that we can't do spiritual life alone. And it's a warning against pride, against thinking that we are the ones who have the great abilities to become something special and wonderful and amazing. It's a warning to remember, like we started with the story this morning, that yes, you can want to do something great, and that's good, do it. But don't try to do it on your own. Don't ignore and reject the power of the being who can actually get you there. Asa really wants to make his nation great, but for some reason that remains unexplained in the text, he refuses the help of the one person who can actually get in there. And what a waste. After all that God has done for him, what a waste to turn toward military power from another nation, toward doctors rather than toward God in prayer, which is his other mistake that we didn't read right there. All of this stuff just leads to the fact that Asa dies. And he dies during wartime rather than peacetime because he chose not to seek the power of God. Let's make sure that we don't make the same mistake. Let's make sure that we remember the words of Ephesians 3, that to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus, because he is able to do more than we ask or even imagine. We are not able, but he is able to do more than we ask or even imagine at work through us. And so all of that gets down to the question to ask this: what do we make of the assessment that God said Asa's whole heart was true all of his days? If at the end he depended on himself instead of being true to God, what do we make of saying that? Well, number one, I think the Chronicles writer is probably using that phrase a little differently than we would. I think what he means is Asa never worshipped an idol. And that's probably what it means, is that not that he was perfect in his faithfulness to God, but that he never worshipped idols. He only worshipped Yahweh. But wouldn't it be wonderful if that phrase made a description of our lives? That our hearts were completely, truly, wholly devoted to God all the time. And that's the invitation for us. Can we learn to serve God entirely, wholly, completely, with everything that we are, so that it can be said of us, the heart of whoever you are was wholly true all of his days to the Lord his God. I hope that that's what you're shooting for. And I hope that if there's somebody among us today who wants to make known their desire to serve him in a public way and to be committed to him fully, that you'll let us baptize you and give you the start that you need to make that happen. And if you want to make that known publicly, why don't you come forward while we stand and sing this hymn together.